City council workshops are intended to provide an opportunity for informal working discussions between city councilors and staff in advance of regular city council meetings in order to allow for high levels of transparency about progress concerning priority policies of Ellsworth. No votes or formal decisions are made at a workshop. Workshops are live streamed at YouTube, and the public is welcome to attend in person. However, due to the workshop format and time constraints, opportunities for public comments may be limited or at the discretion of the city council chair or the designated workshop chair. Formal opportunities for public input on council items may be provided through the city's established public hearing and comment process, those items brought forward to the city council meetings for action. There are also emails are an excellent way to provide public comment to the city councilors and staff. So with that, we're going to start the agenda by discussing the city seal.
Yeah, sure you are. I've got an email list to Sarah. Ask Devlin out.
Do we want to flip it around? We can go to affordable housing, or?
Keep on Stacey, we'll give it for a couple seconds. I do want to just note, I'm so glad a lot of folks are out here tonight. I think we just heard the last comic book person on just how surprised they were. How the people of Ellsworth really come out for these tax-exempt lease administrators. Wow, I'm interested to see what her conversations are at the dinner table. I know the conversations at my dinner table and a lot of the staff's dinner table have been extraordinarily difficult. I'd say on the border of heart-wrenching and fearful, to be perfectly frank. I think some very brave people in the staff came forward previously, including the deputy on some unprofessional conduct that they'd seen and felt that it was important to move that forward. I don't like how the process has played out on this at all. Walking into tonight's workshop, love to have a bunch of people here and wish there'd been more on, but to see signs saying I support city council and city staff, and then just walk in to see recall petitions of other into that to be the driving focus of things, I think has been an enormous distraction for staff, enormous time on something that none of us were expecting to have to realign things towards. I know staff have reported to me on feeling uncomfortable and feeling like in the future they're not going to speak up on things because they have very good evidence now of what that means. And social media attacks on people, claims or comparisons to Gestapo, staff members' pictures being put on social media, real personal attacks that have real effects on everybody's lives. And I'm hopeful, that's the world we live in nowadays in many ways, but there's so many great things in this city. I know when I first became city manager, I went to the chamber dinner, and all anybody wanted to talk to me and my wife about, like, oh my God, what a disaster Ellsworth is, and what you're walking into, and blah, blah, blah. And I was just, my wife commented afterwards saying, oh, what is going on? Like, this place is doing great. And then last year, new Hilton Home to Suites gets announced. Ellsworth's time is now, new growth, and to me, like, that is our Ellsworth still. We just heard about $6 million purchase of a mill mall, and that they're going to rehab it to remain a mall. How many places in America have malls that they're buying, rehabbing to remain malls? We heard about the Tinker Hill Apartments expansion. That Hilton Home to Suites is almost built. Dozens and dozens of housing units. Other big businesses coming into town. Huge valuation increases. There's 2 articles in the Maine Business Journal this week, in addition to the Maine Mill Mall, just talking about the downtown and how it's full and thriving. These are the things that Ellsworth is known for, too, as being the fastest growing city in Maine. And before I became city manager, I talked to somebody who does this work in cities and towns across Maine, and he gave me that kind of warning. He kind of just drops into places when they have staff turnover. And there's a really interesting article about city manager turnover in the Portland Press Herald this week. And he said, yeah, the reason this usually happens is when the council, it starts to become drama all the time, and it kind of factionalizes the community. And avoiding that is pretty key. And I was kind of like, how do you, like, it's not your role, it's my role to avoid that type of thing. But it's happening. That's why there's a ton of people behind me for a workshop. So, I don't know how to deal with that. I do feel like the process for if there are complaints against the city council in the future needs to be very much specified in the charter or the personnel ordinance or the ethics ordinance going forward. Because I know in our internal process and procedures, the idea of any of these steps involving naming staff members or the situation behind what they complained about being brought forward in public, and then to have them risk having their name and credibility in their families and their communities, is very much protected in the process, and nothing except for the disciplinary record is released. So, I think we need to work on that so that in the future this can be much easier on staff and hopefully never has to happen again. But I think in June, as much as I don't want to, that we need to have a more serious conversation about the process side of things.
Too many people standing up. I want to have my seat.
And with that, do we have the city seal? Great.
Oh, look at that. Are you going to continue to move furniture, or can I go?
You can go any way you want.
All right. I'm speaking now to you. I have put on my historic commissioner chair hat instead of from council perspective. And I want to give you background. This is a kind of a saga that's been going on now for almost 3 years. And I want to start with a little background because I have no idea how much everybody knows about the saga. Most of my information from this comes directly from Hildreth Hawes' main emergency relief activities, which was a report done in '35 on all the construction that the CWP was doing in Maine during the Depression. So the '33 fire was certainly a disaster. And if you're going to have your town burned down, you would think in the middle of a depression would be the worst time to have it burned down. There was no money to replace anything. Banks were failing. Unemployment was about 25%. It was a very bad time. Luckily, this was in May of '33. In the fall of '33, FDR's program started to kick in. And they were able to get labor from the Civil Works Administration, administered from Maine Emergency Relief Corporation, and they were able to get a loan from the Reconstruction and Finance Corporation, and that's what made this building possible. Now just a little bit about the building, and bear with me, I do have a point. Edmund Gilchrist from Philadelphia designed it. It's the Georgian Revival style, which was very unusual at the time, kind of a contrast to Maine's rural architecture. And he tasked his son with design of the seal. This was in the cards from the get-go. This wasn't something that was thought about after, let's do a carving of the seal and pop it up there. This was part of the construction process. And it appears as a line item in the adornment phase of the City Hall construction logs. So we don't know who carved it. Could be a local, could be a non-local. As far as I can see, we don't know who carved it. There's a good possibility that somebody in E.L. Shea's cabinetry and millwork shop may have done it, but we don't have any way of telling. It's highly stylized. The seal on the building is highly stylized, kind of folk art, like primitive art, like you associate with Grandma Moses paintings. And they stylized to fit the space, to make this triangle space, done on purpose. What we have always thought was gold leaf, my research tells me probably wasn't. It was probably Dutch metal, because in the middle of a depression, I can't see these folks. I can't imagine them spending thousands and thousands of dollars on gilt gold, which was what it cost back then to them. But that's neither here nor there. Built on 13 pieces of Atlantic white cedar. 13 colonies, 13 pieces of Atlantic white cedar. And it is the focal point of our front-facing gable. It's the largest depiction of the Maine seal, Maine State Seal. And from my research, it's probably unique nationwide. I can find plenty of Depression-era municipal buildings with adornments in that space, but none like this. None like this. It's unique. So they dedicated it in 1935, and there it hung for half a century with only minor repairs, until 1985, when the building was nominated the first time for the National Registry of Historic Places. And in Section 7 of that application to be on the Federal Register, under Section 7, architectural description, character defining feature, carved wooden pediment, Maine State Seal. The implication of this, the reality of this, is that in federal preservation regulations, a character-defining feature is a physical attribute to a building, a structure, that must be retained to maintain the building's historic integrity. If you remove it or replace it with non-historic material, what you're doing is effectively delisting that portion of the building. So keep that in mind. I'm going to skip over the 1999 major repair because it's not really germane here. There was concern about rot. It got taken down. What they did to it, I'm still gathering information. I need to search the detailed records, which will define, because I have to have those records to define future efforts for this scene. Now, here's where the saga begins. In the fall of 2023, under a previous city manager and a previous historic preservation chair and a previous facilities manager, it was mentioned by the facilities manager to the chairman of historic preservation that a piece of the seal of the carving had fallen off. It was also conveyed at that time to the chair by the facilities manager that it was too damaged to repair, and that he recommended scanning the original and replacing it with a composite replica from UMaine's 3D printing facilities. He set up a Zoom meeting with UMaine. The chair and I attended this Zoom meeting, but it became very quickly obvious to us that historic preservation's input was not being looked for, that this was being presented to UMaine as a done deal, that they were going to take it down and replace it with a machine-made plastic one, basically. The end of that meeting was that UMaine strongly recommended that the carving be taken down to be accurately scanned. And what happened then was about a year of historic preservation trying to get the seal taken down. And it was no one's priority. I understand that everything can't be tops. Everything can't be top priority. But it was for us, and we couldn't make any headway whatsoever. The reasoning behind this is we didn't know how damaged it was. But if a piece had fallen off, it was not a good sign. More could fall off and hit somebody and leave us liable. It's just sitting up there rotting as we speak. So we wanted to get it taken down. We couldn't do it. Nobody listened. I also don't know what happened to the broken piece, which I would love to try and track down, because you are never supposed to discard things like that. So I assumed the chair of historic preservation in the summer of 2025, and The commission was not fully functioning, it still isn't, but the members that were there and I had to talk about this because I couldn't let it lie. As a historian, I could not let it lie. And in the fall of 2025, also Roddy Ellenbach of Parks and Rec took over, or was handed, responsibility for the seal. And he came to a historic preservation committee, and it had been conveyed to him too that this was a done deal. Take it down, replace it with something plastic or fake. So then I got elected to city council and I realized I could ask questions. And I just started putting my research back together. And basically, the bottom line from this background is that we cannot make any decisions based on the seal because it's part of City Hall. And we need to reframe our thinking. So, because the City Hall is on the National Register of Historic Places, we have to abide, or at least try very, very hard, to abide by the Secretary of Interior's standards for historical preservation. It defines several different kinds of treatment. Conservation, they consider technical methodology, which can be worked into any one of those. There's 4, though. Go ahead. Here's the 3, a comparison. Preservation, yes, keeps all the historic layers, and it retains the existing fabric. Restoration is reinterpretation. It removes later additions. That's why I need to know what they did in 1999. And conservation is the physical science of what are you going to use in the material to make it safe and time-worthy. This is the 4th option that the Secretary of the Interior offers, reconstruction, and they don't like it. It's not preferred. And that would happen under very extenuating circumstances would they smile on that. Let's say our seal was built of South American ebony, okay? We couldn't possibly get South American ebony wood to fix it, and they would understand that. But Atlantic white cedar is still very prevalent. So that's an example. A scanned 3D replacement would be a reconstruction. It would not meet the standards. So, other thoughts on this plan. Loss of historic integrity due to craftsmanship and the material. There are tool marks on that seal from those craftsmen who carved it in 1935 or 34. That's part of its history. The embellishments, the time they put into it, whatever they were feeling when they carved it in the middle of this horrendous depression, that's in the craftsmanship. And as far as the material, it's replaced like kind, and that's Atlantic white cedar. Now the white cedar has done pretty well if you think about it. It's only come down once for major repairs, and if it had come down a little sooner than 1999, those repairs probably wouldn't have had to have been so extensive. Do I have another slide?
Yeah, one more. This is
Okay. So here's the pass. If we conserve it, we maintain National Register eligibility. How might that be jeopardized if we don't follow the guidelines? Well, I'm not going to lie to you. The federal police don't come to our door and say, you didn't do what you were supposed to do, we're taking you off the registry. But what happens is most often in municipal buildings, when they do something out of necessity or desire that doesn't meet the standards, it opens the door for future generations to do the same. And eventually you have a cumulative effect, and eventually a lot of these buildings do get delisted. from historic. Like I said, longevity, the cedars held up amazingly well. I don't know what kind of shape it's in now. Everybody keeps telling me that it's very damaged and too badly damaged to repair, but nobody's ever looked at it since 1999. Composite would be unknown. Certainly, I'm certainly sure that UMaine has great faith in it, but none of it has been outside in a Maine winter for 50 or 80 years. Philosophy in conserving it is protecting the real thing. It's the real thing. It's the emotion, it's the determination, it's the rebirth from that fire up there on the wall versus creating fake history, because a composite will have no historical value whatsoever, none. And then cost. It's going to cost a ton of money. I'm not going to lie to you. Historic conservation costs a lot of money, more than normal maintenance, because it has to be to certain standards. So can I tell you how much? Not a clue. Not a clue. We need to get it down and look at it. As far as the cost of UMaine's scanning and milling, we don't have a price on that either. At the meeting, I did ask a question, where were we talking, how many figures? And I was told mid-5 figures. What that means, I don't know. But anyway, that is the comparison. Do I have another slide? So what's the plan? Go ahead. I don't have one.
If you have a logical next step,
Yes, I do. Yes,
well,
I
go to the logical next
I'm
step.
asking for my slide. Thank you. All right, we have no other slide. Yes. Purpose of the workshop being to discuss what I will be asking the council for when we meet. This is too big for the Historical Commission to handle on its own. I would ask for the appointment of a task force. Historic preservation can provide the history. It can't, it doesn't know anything about funding or logistics or cranes or permits or anything like that. So we need a diverse task force. And I would ask that their first goal be to get that seal off the building by November and into a temperature-controlled environment where it can dry. Because in answer to your question, that has to be the next step.
Absolutely.
It has to go in somewhere dry, somewhere that doesn't get too hot or too cold, so that it can dry out. Once it's dry, we can have a professional come in and appraise its condition. And then we will be better suited to make decisions about how we want to proceed. So, all I can tell you is it's going to be wicked expensive.
Now, the question is, who's gonna pay for it?
I can't tell you that either. I might not even be here.
That's where we are right now.
There you go.
Sir, and Carol, can you address the council?
Sorry.
And again, there's no public comment during the workshop. I appreciate everyone's patience. Thank you.
There is one thing to consider. When you follow the rules, there are more opportunities for help with this kind of thing. Now, it depends on the commission coming back to life and completing the process for certified local government. If we can do that, then we become privy to grant money that could pay for up to 60% of the conservation of the seal. They certainly, and we certainly can't get a grant to have UMaine mill one. So, I have absolutely no idea how much this will cost, just a lot. So, here's another option. Do nothing. I mean, how important is it to the community? I don't know, that's why I wanted to give this presentation. Do nothing. Leave it up there, eventually it will decay and fall down on its own. I mean, I'm sure, and maybe it doesn't mean anything to people, I don't know. See, it's not really my history because I haven't lived here this long. But I can identify with it because my history is in Willimantic, Connecticut, and consists of 2 huge bronze frogs that the city fathers keep putting Christmas hats on at Christmas. But just about every New England community has something like this. This is something really special. And I think we need to jettison that idea of a milled fake and not even reconsider it until we know what the condition of it is. Or we can just do nothing if people think it's going to be too expensive and don't want to pay for it or help pay for it. That's an option too.
Great.
Okay?
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I mean, this workshop council, you guys have questions for Carol?
Well, Carol teaches history. I'm kind of like, I like history. So I kind of dabble and reach into stuff. And I really agree with you. You can't replace it with anything but what the original material was made out of. And we have plenty of cedar. We're in Maine, okay? Well, I wish I could give you an answer on, you know, and have bragging rights that one of my a bunch of my grandfather's craftsmen carved it out. I'm sorry, I can't give you that. I don't know.
A lot of people have looked for that information based on that.
At one time, I found actual blueprints of the building. Where they are at now, I wish I could tell you, okay? But I'm pretty sure it spelled out where that seal was supposed to go and how it was fastened on there. Like I said when I was running for office, I'm tired of kicking the can down the road. If we keep passing things down the road, it's gonna cost you more and more and more. And this is the taxpayer's house. You know, we need to fix the windows in the cupola. We need to make sure the outside of this building is preserved, and that needs to be repaired and done right. Is it gonna cost a lot of money? Oh, heck yeah. But there's ways of getting funding for that. You know, very, very important funding. Okay? This is a piece of history. It's a piece of your history. Someday I'm gonna be gone, and it's gonna be your kids' history. Yours. Your great grandkids. You know what I mean? Look. Obviously, other city councils and other city managers have kicked the can down the road. We need to do something. Fix the seal. Set a planning motion. Get the windows fixed so we don't have tarps inside our attic, which is disgusting. And save the building. You're not gonna build another building like this. Not gonna be like this.
Pat, is this you volunteering to be on the task force?
Everybody needs to be part of the cog on that gear.
Yeah, I agree. Counselor White?
How hard is it for us, how long will the process be? How hard do you think it would be to become this certified government?
Well, first thing we do is have.
Carol, can you get to the mic? So.
Yep.
First thing that has to happen is we have to get membership up. We're missing 3 members.
So you have to have a full membership
Yes,
in
have
order
have full
to?
membership.
Okay.
And then it's not a problem.
Okay. It's a pretty quick process after that.
Yeah, that's the only reason that the membership application didn't get sent.
Okay.
Any other questions for Carol from council? Staff? Thank you, Carol. That was very informative and.
I have a few more in just the first.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, just to thank Carol for, we had a great meeting in my office, I don't know, 2 months ago, 3 months ago now, although we had to kick it back a few times. I think we tried to have this conversation, but other things got in the way. I think the history you just gave of is another just kind of the inertia that's been on this project. And in some ways, we trying to figure that out. We have a great facilities director here now, and we have, but he's only been here 6 months, and we've got our Parks and Rec director is also in facilities. I know, and I think in general, it's kind of been, there's been some inertia here. It's, to your point, it's like this humane, they'll scan it, they'll do a polymer, it's kind of like, okay, one of those pieces is there's been turnover at humane, and I just got a text from Roddy on this. He had a family function that he was previously at, but, and we're following up on the actual broken piece. But yeah, it kind of was in that category, and as you mentioned, all the sills on all these buildings are like rotted out, and the pointing on all the bricks needs to be done. We did a little bit of repairs on the cupola because it was literally like an MMA finding of a leak in the building from 6 years ago, and then they reached out, last year and said, "How did that leak go? You said you were going to fix it." It was like, that was 6 years ago and nothing's been done. So I think we came to this council, we reappropriated, and that's leaking in from the top. It's gone. The tarps are,
They're helping, yeah, but,
and they're not as needed as much. I used to go up there all the time and the buckets were full.
Right,
So
right.
the buckets are less full, but Carol and I were talking, and she said to me, and hope you don't mind me saying to the coach, said, "The powers that be, they're just against this." And I looked at her, I said, "You're a city councilor. I'm the city manager. Like, we're the powers that be." So, like, how do we figure this out? Like,
Where there's a will, there's a way. We've got to take care of our buildings. We've got to take care of the stuff that was entrusted to us.
and I do think this task force, which is Councilor Martineau's idea, I think could help. And oftentimes in committees, and task force is kind of another government to use for, well, we'll make the task force do it. But
Yeah.
something project specific I have seen in a lot of communities and towns and been a part of things like this, where it's, hey, we have to do X. This piece is important. And with a focus of great members of the community and the Historic Commission and others, I think that will help kind of get the rapidity we need to be super laser focused on this piece. I did talk to Woodlawn. They do have a kind of a storage facility that's climate controlled to handle their historic archives. They're not terribly interested in just acquiring, because if it's not relative to them, but they did say, if we did bring it down and needed a place to store it, and there'd be some compensation for that, it would be an excellent potential storage place. Now, that's not guaranteed. But that to me is one of the key inflection points, both for this task force and the council, is seems like we're migrating away from, let's get the full scan, swap it out, once there's a full plan in place, because it's degrading. We haven't had a piece fall down in the last couple of years, but I know putting some mesh on there to make sure no more falls down, to your point of the historic nature of this, that really could be, and maybe it will, nearly disintegrate if not taken down carefully. But the Woodlawn executive director, who's incredible.
Eventually, it will reach a point where it can't be repaired. I mean, if it had been, like I said, if it had been taken down, like maybe 1990, then whatever they did in 1999 wouldn't have had to have been so extensive. And then it probably needed to come down 10 years ago. So maybe some kind of legacy has to be adopted where every generation has to take it down or have some way to inspect it while it's up there. I don't know. This is the process of having to find out.
Yeah, and they mentioned the main preservation. I don't know if they've been reached out to yet on this.
Yes, and they have whole lists of people that can be consulted on these issues.
Because that's one of my big things. If it comes down and we don't have a plan to swap it back out. Police department, thank you. They did take their drone and do a 3D scan. So if worst really does come to worst, then that's not enough for these coming to composites. But it seems like we might be migrating away from that anyways. It's also on the capital improvement plan list. To your point, one of the
short-term list of projects, it was identified.
So we're going to continue that discussion. There's $20 million in basically cans that have been kicked down the road that we have to decide. Pump House Point is deteriorating, but I think this is a good process to move forward on. So
I think the thing to remember is this kind of conservation takes years, not months. I mean, ideally, it would be nice if we could find somewhere that the city owns to put it, That would be ideal. Mainly because we don't want it to get lost along the way. You know, somebody eventually buys an unclaimed storage unit and they find an 18-foot seal of Maine in it. Yeah, we wouldn't want that to happen, but, yes, it needs to come down.
Oh, it's gonna come down for us to take any next steps
Yes,
regardless.
it's a logical plan for whatever
Yeah.
we're gonna do.
And I think that is in the SIP and just working with or who's done something like that before, taking down, because it feels like that's not just, send the IT department up in the bucket truck to start figuring it out. We want somebody with some substantial preservation skills to make sure that it's, everything's done to, if it really is, I think our last facilities director, that was his guidance was this thing, if you try to take it down, it's just gonna fall apart. So really just from his perspective, it kind of, the scan had to happen, you have to have that other piece. But we need to have a preservation expert kind of go in there. That could be more expensive in the near term too, but that we'll let the task force come to that piece on what the recommendation is there, probably in the first piece on do we take it down right now? And what's the plan and what's the timeline to get it swapped out? With something either rehabilitated or historically replicated to the standards it would need to be. So thank you, Councilor Martineau.
Great.
I think this is an opportunity for two things. Excuse me, I know that you've been actively trying to get the word out for the Historic Preservation Commission, but with this heightened interest and knowing that getting members on board, if you want to talk about what the commission is looking for in membership. And then secondarily, if we're talking about this, the seal coming down, one of the concerns has been that gaping blank space that we're all just used to taking for granted. This beautiful seal, just an open thing for all of us to think about when you're awake at 3 o'clock in the morning. What would we fill that with? Is there anything, because it'll be down for an extended amount
Yes,
of
it
time.
will.
It's just to toss out the idea. What would we do? Leave it blank is an option, but just tossing that out for people to consider. But what are you looking for?
I have a real cute
Commission?
picture of my dog.
I think that would be, I think July would look good there. What are you looking for in commission members? What are the requirements?
I mean,
What's the
obviously,
gaps?
we're looking for people who are interested in history. You don't have to be an expert in history, but you have to be interested in it. But probably more important is there is a learning curve, because historic preservation is different. I have a PhD in history, but I'm not a preservationist, So there needs to be a little reading done. But it's, we handle the certificates of appropriateness when a building in one of our historic districts wants to make changes. They submit their application to code enforcement, which comes to us. Then we look at whatever it is that they are going to do and see if it meets the criteria. Now, that said, homeowners have to be given more latitude. What's important to the city as far as our antique homes is concerned is what they look like from the street. We want that street view we want to preserve that because that's what speaks out in the city. But if they want to paint their dining room purple, that's certainly their prerogative. And sometimes there are things that are recommended to be done to old homes that people simply cannot afford, and a good example of that is Bangor and the slate roof. Bangor came down very hard on a man who just couldn't afford $300,000 for a slate roof, and they told him that he had to, and eventually they walked it back. And that's too bad, but it's reality. So we do that. We haven't been engaged in any other projects. I think this is going to be a big one. One thing I will say is this building and the library, the two city-owned buildings, they need to have administrative histories drawn up and added to constantly. That's so that when 100 years from now, when we're all dust and people are sitting in this chamber, they're not going, what the hell were these people doing? Administrative history on maintenance and historic changes and preservation and what did you do and how did you do it. I did work on one for the Mark Twain House when I was in grad school. I did a whole administrative history on their petunias. I'm not kidding. They planted a lot of different kind of petunias over the years. But, yeah, so that's another thing that I would like the commission to take on. So, research and writing and going through archives. There's a lot of city archives I gotta try to locate. So,
Great, thank you, Carol. Great. I learned a lot about the seal. And very important things. Okay, well, I think we're on to the next agenda item, affordable housing.
Yeah, and Twyla, if you want to. So, working on the titling of this too, is it affordable? Is it workforce housing? Is it, I think, attainable housing is something that Councilor Smith was telling me is one of the newer terms that folks in this space are prioritizing. And Ellsworth, as mentioned before, with new units coming up, we got a fair amount of housing growth in the city. It's not in the attainable category, unfortunately, for more and more people. So that is we discussed it, I think, 2 council meetings ago, was supporting a grant application for the Department of Economic and Community Development for the Beals Avenue project, which is around 36 housing units that, I'll get some of the numbers wrong here, but they're building for $400,000+ and trying to sell for like $280 for a set of them through a whole series of federal, state grants that they've already put together so that people can own those properties. And then there'd be a covenant on those homes for a certain amount of time so they can't just get it for under market rate, kind of leave, swap it, sell it. It goes back to market rate that it would that it would stay in that covenant. But they're having a tough time making the financing pencil over. They were denied for that infrastructure grant from DECD, but DECD also said, hey, we'd be interested if you come back to us in the next round in the spring. Is they're really looking for kind of the shovel-ready aspect, and then to potentially help with like the down payments for these folks, because if you're making, I think it's 80% of area median income, right? Which was 70. What was that?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but there was a range for those units between 80 and 120. So it would take a range of folks in different incomes.
Hey, Twyla, can you pull the mic a little closer?
Yeah. No, it was a range of 80 to 120, so that it would be able to accept, some in maybe a little higher, and then some on the lower end. Yeah.
Right. So that still leaves them short of the infrastructure side of things, where we're looking at some other grant opportunities. This has been a project that's been with the city for 2 years now, and it's just, to me, it's kind of like a microcosm for, can attainable housing, even with state, federal, a developer who really, this is a passion project for them, so that it can be built as sort of a proof of concept for moving forward on these pieces. But they've had trouble along the way. They went to the planning board. We have an incredible planning board that's extremely detailed. There was a line of sight variance that they gave at the intersection at Beals that went to the zoning board of appeals. The appeals overruled the planning board on approving the project, but then that later got overturned because the zoning board of appeals shouldn't have even heard the project because it wasn't a timely appeal. So they had to come back to invalidate their own decision, and this is like years of, and as we all know, inflation has increased a lot during that time frame. So we're really thinking how, as a city, if we're going to prioritize attainable workforce housing, we need tools in our tool belt to be able to make these processes work smoother, but also what is the temperature of the council for not just the tool of the supporting a grant application for something, but like other cities and towns in Maine, to potentially design the new TIF districts or add affordable housing TIF districts that can incentivize this type of work. And that could kind of take a few forms. With this project, we could consider something similar to if you're trying to get senior housing here, they've offered like the infrastructure, the city can donate a variety of things, and then that gives the developer the break. I think we do this with the Leonard Lake senior housing to some extent. We have a debt service on some things there. So do we want to prioritize affordable housing where, I think it was a $15 million or so project, so, the 15.66 mill rate, which is, by the way, one of the lowest of any service center in Maine. I think it's the second lowest, or third lowest. And, 15.66 of a $15 million project that doesn't happen is zero tax dollars for the city. So do we want to, but the problem with a project like this is they're trying to let people buy their homes. So giving a tax credit on the future doesn't really help them, the developer who's building the project. It would help the owner. But should we look into infrastructure investments that could be financed with the tax revenue from the project itself to finance like the initial infrastructure investment to get this to pencil over projects? The other piece is there's like the 150 units on behind the bowling alley that's gone through and is in a similar sort of, hasn't penciled over, and is also, Twyla, did they say they're interested in a TIF as well?
In an affordable housing TIF, yes.
So that would be a different story. You could, if a certain amount of the units were affordable housing and had income restrictions on them so that they are affordable rents, with the developer on that project owning those units for a longer period of time, you'd potentially give them a tax break for a certain amount of years on that project, so it makes it more affordable for them to build the project, but then also the city gets workforce and attainable housing so people can live and work in this community. So there's kids in school, the community, so the housing stock is protected from becoming short-term rentals that don't have people living here year-round. So that's another area. Would you say there's one other developer that also reached out recently?
Yeah, I don't know how much I can say about that right now because he's still kind of looking in the area and considering Ellsworth as a location, but the request kind of, with our staff when we met with him was that it would only make sense if he could also have an affordable housing tip.
So to me, this is something that I think we should spend time on, I don't think it's good for anybody if this kids and grandkids of the folks here can't come back to afford a home to live here. If, more and more of the housing stock, I think we're down a third grade. We heard in the budget presentations from the schools recently, if we don't keep having kids come into our schools, that's going to be a big issue for this community over a 10, 20, 30-year horizon. So continuing to prioritize affordable housing seems to be something I really wanted to start working on, and just but we oftentimes spend our time on other things, and really important things like the city seal and affordable housing, attainable housing, workforce housing just gets put in the back burner because it's too conceptual and it's going to take a ton of time. Twyla did an insane amount of work to get the new TIF districts put together. That's going to take time to work on for the valuations in those areas to kick off more increment. Same thing with the downtown. But also there's the 120 odd acres kind of in the growth area around the courthouse that could also be a really prime location right in our urban growth center, right in our water and sewer lines to really prioritize workforce and attainable housing. So, but at the same time, if this isn't a big priority for the council, or they're not interested in these types of tools being brought forward, I don't want to spend a ton of time on it. We've got a lot of other things. This one, to me, kind of comes to the top of the list in terms of how we need to prioritize offerings and toolkits. And I'd also note for the community, like there's no staff, we're going to do this and then there'll be a backroom deal with a developer and it all comes to fruition. Like any TIFs, any credit enhancement agreements, they have to come through the council, and they have a whole very large process that they would have to go through with lots of public input and dialogue. So that this will be a long form process, and it doesn't just happen tomorrow. Anything else to add, Twyla?
Just a reminder that when the new TIF districts or the proposed ones were approved by council, along with that was the creation of a TIF task force or a TIF committee, and so that provides another layer not only for public comment, when the TIF committee meets and goes through these applications and talks about the capital stack analysis, which is part of my role, right, of sitting down with each developer and figuring out what capital they have to work with, what they still need, how, if and how the city can help through a credit enhancement agreement with an affordable housing TIF. But again, that all comes kind of as a first accountability step, if you will, to this TIF task force. And then it would come to council on the recommendation of the task force. So a lot of work being done ahead of time in the vein of increased transparency and just like being able to have the public attend meetings around it, because that's just how we believe it should work when it comes to new housing units and work and anything that would affect some of the money captured in those TIFs going to the developer, which would be in both cases, probably in all three cases. The credit enhancement agreement could be anything from 50% to, for 10 years to 100%, for a couple of years to whatever the task force would bring to the council and whatever the council would decide. I don't know if that makes sense. I know TIF is still like a lot of.
Counselor
lot of
Smith?
lingo.
To that point, I was going to add, I still have up in my browser, there is the page on the city website which has an outline of what a tax increment financing is and a link to a recording of a presentation you did. As we move forward with this, credit enhancement agreements, I need a refresher on with how they're different from. So I'd be supportive of your efforts going into looking at, is this what it takes to have more families be able to live in Ellsworth? I need to better understand what the credit enhancement agreement is different from a TIF. So I'd make that request for in the
Okay.
future.
That's not for now. I mean, just really briefly though, it's not that it's like different from the TIF, it's just the way the TIF, the increment, the tax increment is split. So instead of it going into like an econ dev fund, for example, it's,
Yeah.
yeah.
I've drafted credit enhancement agreement for work, and they're basically an agreement between the city and the developer for that specific TIF project. And it outlines potentially, how the TIF revenue, tax revenues are allocated, and they're either over like a 20 or 30-year time horizon. And oftentimes, the way they're designed is upfront, the tax revenue that project creates goes back to the developer for some percentage. And then over time, you can phase it out, because in theory, they need the capital more upfront. And then over time, it phases out, and then all those tax dollars just come to the city. And so, communities do it all over the state. I did one for Skowhegan for affordable housing, and the New Balance shoe factory has a credit enhancement agreement, the new one, and we drafted that. So it's pretty common for communities to use. Question I have is, am I correct that we have a limit on how many acres in the city can be under a TIF district, but is it affordable housing separate from that calculation for kind of the standard TIF district? Do you know? Like, we can have upwards of, I think, 5% total in TIF, but I think affordable housing might be a separate bucket. I can't remember.
I do believe it is a separate bucket because it's, the application does not go to DECD, it goes to main housing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is like a separate type of TIF, separate from the districts we've
Yes.
just created.
That's correct.
And those are more, and it's specific to attainable workforce housing.
Attainable. I apologize. I go back to what they call it at that level.
Yeah, they call it
technically,
affordable
so
housing at the state
in my head,
level,
that's
yeah.
always what I go to. I apologize.
Yeah, if memory serves me correct, the affordable housing TIF districts are areas that don't count against your acreage limits on the other TIFs, the economic development, MTIFs is what I think they call them.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So there's also another kind of sub piece of this to keep in mind, which I know we're keeping in mind, and for the eventual TIF committee to really look at, which is in 2030, the Beckwith Hill TIF district expires. So, we've done some good work on establishing new TIF districts, and downtown TIF district with a 2-year look back, and which will give the opportunity for some of our economic development initiatives to move forward if the council so chooses to let that TIF district expire. We'll lose some of the 59 cents on the dollar, reasons that you do shelter that tax increment in those districts. So that would be a big loss to the city if it just all went back into the general fund and we didn't utilize, because we get offsets from the state. Well, they'll stop reimbursing us as much for our schools. They'll stop reimbursing us as much for revenue sharing because we've let the TIF district sunset. There is, I think, a new option, which I know is more of a long-term on, I think is it 75% of the TIF district? If it's for affordable housing or housing initiatives, then you can extend that TIF district and keep that funding
20 years.
for 20 more years. So, we could kind of do some more short-term credit enhancement agreements and as a long-form housing policy, because I don't think this housing issue is going to be, I'd hopefully we'll solve it in 3 years and 5 months, but it feels like that could be a really excellent tool for the city, future city councils in 2030 to have an affordable housing sort of toolkit to move forward on to also help in this category. So we'll be looking at that as well. Is there any other questions about TIFs and affordable housing?
I think I'm just, I'm in support of it. And I know if you're trying to get, a sense of where the council's at, I'll just say I'm in support of pursuing affordable TIF districts. Helps incentivize this type of development, which we desperately need in Ellsworth. So I think it's worth our time and effort to see if we can't work on that.
Yeah, not necessarily looking for a show of hands or anything like that. It's more of a, I'll probably start coming back, and maybe we'll start with some of the individual credit enhancement agreements that Twyla, so we can say, hey, this would be what it would be for this project and what it would be for this project, and that way you all can have, maybe at a workshop, really dive into the details. I think there'd need to be, a lot more public engagement too in information campaigns. I know we did a lot of that. Thank you, Twyla, for setting up the websites on the TIF district expansion project, what they mean, do's and don'ts, an FAQ. But, to me, I'm kind of like former Councilor Beal, generally opposed to credit enhancement agreements, especially when business is booming to the way it is in Ellsworth. When you're, so to offer a credit enhancement agreement to get a hotel probably doesn't make a lot of sense. We're having hotels be built without credit enhancement agreements. But for affordable housing, attainable workforce housing, that's like a missing middle of the housing market. Rentals are extremely tough around here, and it affects not having employees to work. It affects people not being able to go to school here, and so it seems like we should really, do what we can as a city to make us as friendly to that aspect as we are to all the other businesses that are coming here and investing in Ellsworth. So we'll probably come back at a later time with a little bit more data on what those TIFs would look like. Yep.
I just want, how's the task force committee coming? Have you started looking for people? Have you gotten any interest? What's the timeline on that?
This, hopefully in June, we would like early.
After approval?
Yeah, I mean, no, I think either way, we should have it in place for our existing TIFs. So the plan was to kind of get to where we did with the budget and then start reaching out to folks and meet in June.
Great.
Yeah,
Great.
for the first time.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, we received some edits back from the state on, but they seemed to be mostly administrative. They weren't.
Yeah.
They were all kind of like, you need to add this or delete this language from all these items to be in line with things. So fingers crossed that they approve, but we will see.
Great. Any other questions from council for staff? Great, thank you. There's no public comment for
Oh, I
it.
didn't know if it might have time.
Yeah, there is no public comment. There's no public comment, sir.
On the website, it said limit.
there may be limited, and we have a full agenda that we need to get through. So I'm going to ask that we now take up the next agenda item, which is the data center discussion.
Can I ask how the public?
There's many ways for the public to participate. Yes, so you can email, so Twyla is our Economic Development Director. If you have questions, you're free to email her. We have a email address that can go to all the city councilors, I believe, so you can email questions to the city council. There's numerous ways for the public to participate in all these matters. We're gonna have follow-up meetings in that as well. I think we're gonna have a focused workshop where getting more public engagement. But, for these general workshops, we have a very tight agenda. We do them in 2 hours so people can get home to their families. So if there is any time at the end for public comment on any of these issues, we'll get to it. If not, again, there's numerous ways for the public to engage with the city on these issues, and there will be further discussions on these matters.
Is that task force been created for the?
So I'm going to so we got the data center discussion, which is next on the item. I think we're already running a little bit behind.
Yeah, so sir, any questions folks have on any of these specific issues, you feel free to email the people that are talking about them, the staff or the city council, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can, and we'll take that information under advisement.
This one was, I think, brought to me originally by Councilor Smith, M. Smith, but then separately, I got a very similar sounding email from Councilor White, and so it seemed like a good opportunity to bring it in a workshop to discuss more in general. Maybe I'll kind of give a little bit of landscaping and then open it up to the council on their questions and concerns. I think a lot of the discussion is on, does the city of Ellsworth need a moratorium on data centers? And, I know the state was considering a moratorium as well, which ended up not passing. I believe the governor vetoed it, and it didn't have enough to override that veto. So, and a lot of concern. It was like, hey, what if a data center just pops up in the backyard if we don't have something? And here right now, I would say, unless it's under 4,000 square feet, which would be, a GameStop, not a data center, it would have to go through planning board. So I think there are some cities or towns, you see these things where there's some kind of deal that's struck and it's put under some weird name and nobody knows about it in the community until the thing is already getting built. And it's like, what in the world's going on? That would be, not possible here in Ellsworth. I have talked to our attorney about this, that, if it did come through planning board, you would still have the opportunity at that point in time to, if something did come to the city's attention, it would have to go through that. The council at that point in time could put a moratorium on the data centers to figure out what type of regulatory environment they would want to put forward. So I'm a little bit in we need to do a lot of public outreach, that there's no, surprise data center that's going to come into Ellsworth, that it would have community engagement, council engagement, the opportunity to put a moratorium so that the regulations on what the requirements, all those pieces would be. So I'm not as inclined to sort of pre-regulate a data center, which to my knowledge hasn't come through yet. But at the same time, I understand that there are a lot of concerns with these parcels coming through, and is there, so if we are going to pursue a moratorium, like, I do also feel like we need to do that right, to put forward the regulations, so on where it would need to be, and then that would be its own set of rules and tasks, but that's a ton of time. Or do we want to spend that on the seal, or do we want to spend it on attainable housing? That there always is a kind of zero-sum aspect to some of these pieces. So my kind of guidance right now is we don't need a moratorium as of yet, but there's a great op-ed from Senator Grahowski in the Ellsworth American today on what the state is pursuing relative to this. And I can also see as a signal from the council, if the council really doesn't wants to have a very restrictive regulatory environment for data centers, that could also be, like, we can have that discussion too, on if we need a moratorium now, and then we really start pursuing like these are the very restrictive circumstances we want or not, or we'll have to have a whole process for that. But that I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable just kind of moratoriuming it and then not, that's,
Did you see the picture of the drinking water in Utah the day after that data center went online?
I did not know.
That was quite interesting. That went online, and the next morning their drinking water was like mud. That it was pulling so much power out through the river, or the reservoir, whatever they were using. Yeah, that's bad business.
Has anyone in the city staff looked much into impacts of data centers as far as, how it would impact municipal resources? I mean, I'll admit I don't know a lot about it. I just know they're very big and they use a lot of water and energy. So I just don't, it'd be helpful to know, like, what are we looking at as far as what does that take and what does Ellsworth have as capacity? I guess, and if the answer is not yet, then that's fine. We can all do our own research and all the free time we have. But also, are we aware of anyone that's come knocking on any doors saying, hey, we're thinking about doing a data center in Ellsworth? No.
No,
Okay.
that's kind of why I'm in the,
We can't get much power out of solar panels.
Well,
They need a lot of electricity.
A lot of-
Oh, yeah.
A lot of electricity.
I don't think
And
we
a
have the
lot of
grid
water.
let's not talk of each
And-
other,
And
please.
a lot of water, because of the cooling, because electronics, there's a lot of heat generation because of all the amperage and the power usage. And then the other thing is data center, there's a lot of fiber optics and have to be feeding into the facility. So, yeah, there's a lot of resources that would be impacted.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, the pictures I've seen and the limited information I've read, it's no, we're not putting in an arcade.
I think the reason there's areas in Maine, like up towards Skowhegan, Farmington, that area there, you've got hydroelectric power, hydroelectric power, plus the paper mill has a biomass boiler that generates electricity, which right now the paper mill is closed, so. And, that's one of the things about paper mills is they generate their own electricity, and what they don't use, they put back out onto the grid, you see.
Okay. Councilor M. Smith, thanks, Pat.
I've done some research and just trying to get better oriented, and a lot of these eminently more bigger centers, they do rely upon, they currently really don't use renewables. They rely upon a lot of the fossil fuels. And I do recall that you mentioned during, it was feedback for High Street. I believe you mentioned that there are times that you had to ask Jackson Lab to stop pulling as much water. And that is one of my core concerns with, I do understand that it would take, we do have a good planning board, we do have a good process, but I want to make sure that the conversation around data centers, if one were to be proposed, actually stays at a manageable temperature, because as he talked about, this will take a lot of resources, and we need to have a proper discussion before any decision on this. And I do have concern in that things could get too hot if we don't have time to get regulation or make a proper decision. Because we're kind of seeing this already with what's happening with even all the hard work that went into the cannabis licensing, we're still encountering hiccups. And with something this intricate, I think it would be good to at least have the time to have that discussion and properly communicate, we want to do this right, regardless of whatever policy decision is made. And I'm gonna stop right now because I need to make sure I have a voice.
Counselor Ted?
Oh, I wanted to have this discussion in the open, and because I have many concerns about a data center coming into Ellsworth, and specifically for the environmental impacts, as I am the tree hugger of the group here. So I'm glad that we're talking about this. Thank you for following up with the lawyer to find out that even if we are approached, we do have the ability to put a moratorium in place at that point. I agree with you that this needs to be a broader discussion with the community and with Pat, that we have to protect our resources for our community and not give it all away to an outside organization with a data center, so.
Nancy?
3 points come to mind with what's happened in other towns. Often it has gone so far along the line because of non-disclosure agreements with either their council or their planning board. And so how do we, not a question to be answered today, but one of the questions raised is, how do we ensure that it doesn't get so far down the road with these non-disclosure agreements that we're in a position where suddenly we're getting pushed back because the moratorium is happening after the project has gone through a certain amount of development. The advantage of doing a moratorium before there's a project is it's happening before there's a project that people have already invested money in. Bangor passed their moratorium. They did not have anyone coming to ask about putting a moratorium in. They just wanted to get their ducks in a row ahead of time, as I'm hearing from other counselors. The other thing I want to mention, rather than doing our own research, you all know I work for Grow Smart Maine during my day job. There's a webinar this Thursday at 4 o'clock on data centers and what communities can do. There's someone from, one speaker, I think from the Brookings Institution, one from the Union of Concerned Scientists, and one from the City of Bangor. And that is the idea, is what can communities do to do this? Go to growsmartmaine.org. It's easy enough to find the webinar there, and you can register at no cost. So there's no barrier for cost. There's no financial incentive for me sitting here talking about it. You can access it at no cost. It's an hour. If you aren't available at 4 o'clock this Thursday, it'll be recorded, and you can find it on Grow Smart Maine's YouTube channel afterwards. And I'll work, I struggle with my Outlook email. Can't use it efficiently as my Google folders, but can share the information with anyone who's interested. So it's another resource. We will be having another webinar probably in July, maybe August, with tools and resources and a toolkit for communities. So there are a lot of communities are concerned about this, whether one is coming or not. The communities that didn't know it was coming, and suddenly they've got all of the conflict that comes with something. So this is a way to get in front of it. I don't know if we need a moratorium here. I don't know if we have the assets that they're looking for. That's the point. And I think that's what I heard is raising the concerns, is we don't know.
I think we could.
So,
They just built a $55 million electric substation in Versant here in Ellsworth. So we are a energy hub, and we're about to resize a $20 million plus water treatment plant because we're reaching our thresholds.
And we have a river, which is it enough for this? I don't know.
And like where it would be, now we have a lot of land mass too, so we'd probably want to make sure as part of this regulatory environment that obviously it's nowhere near downtown, and to really put in regulations so that it would be, even though if it might pull water, it would have to be farther out. I think that's one of the likely things that we're going to be confronted in this scenario is, what Jay has, it's a $550 million facility, so that kicks off, if you have a 15.66 mill rate, $7.8 million in tax revenue, that's like 75% of the city side of the budget. School's like 16 million, I believe, to the city's 11 million in local, so you'd basically be offsetting So that would be your tough decision, but how much is that gonna drain down Branch Lake? And is, the planning folks, they've, just to your point, Patrick, they've looked in general, we've shared some research and some articles on some of these issues that you mentioned as well. This would take up a lot of time to put this forward, to do it right as well, so.
The other thing I was thinking, another reason to get it in place proactively is because these kinds of enterprises have good public relations firms. And if they have an idea that they want to come in somewhere, and I'm not talking about just data centers, but big box stores, anything, start spinning their presence as something good and positive, and then you get a whole mess. Then you get controversy over it.
Yeah, it's kind of sad in some ways,
Now,
because
you're never gonna have to pay taxes again with our data center.
it's one of the largest construction initiatives probably in infrastructure-wise in the country in decades and decades. I wish we were doing this with affordable housing. I was talking to actually
That'd be amazing.
somebody who was marrying somebody who worked on Jackson Lab in their engineering when he was there, and their firm won't do more than 30% of all their construction is data centers. They're like, we're not going to do any more than that. He's like, we probably could do 70% data centers. So it is a massive growth piece, and there could be a ton of tax revenue associated with it, but with environmental and other concerns that are extremely important. So I'm hearing kind of enough discussion where I think I'll talk to the planning board on, what that moratorium might mean, and thinking about it with the project management team on, getting ahead of some of these issues to see if, the water treatment plant could be sized to house this. I know Eastport had a very weird headline on that there's an underwater data center being built in Eastport. I thought it was like,
Being proposed, not being built.
is this the Lake Lost City of Atlantis down there? And, but I think it's just that they're using the tidal energy to potentially power a data center. I don't think they're like, maybe they build it underground. So.
I would just add one other aspect to look at is decommissioning. When you have a massive facility, what happens? And decommissioning may be the wrong word, but what do you do with the facility if they decide to just leave?
I was thinking about that. Solar panels is one of those things in the decommissioning, the wind too. This though, can you really decommission data without this, or do you need it unless the internet needs to leave sometime? So I don't know. But those are questions I'll probably be learning more about.
We all use data centers. If you've got a phone, you're using a data center. So it's not being against the data centers, but let's make sure,
Yeah.
if there's interest in coming to Ellsworth, is there a place in a way that it would make sense and add to our tax base?
I think if the
It's
AI
possible,
bots,
but we don't know.
yeah, if the AI bots start trying to take over, then we're probably gonna have to decommission them real quick.
These guys, the people behind this technology are not big environmentalists. So,
Well, I'm just full of all kinds of fun things today. The dam relicensing as well.
No, you've got that.
This is one that I've started to look into more. I think this is, talking about the history of Ellsworth here, Carol. That dam as well. I think it's a historic landmark too.
Yes, it is.
It is, right?
It's on the National Historic Register as well as the state.
Isn't it is it the tallest dam in Maine as well? I think it might be.
Pretty close, but no, I'm not really sure about that. I know the dam was originally started, construction was in 1907. And my grandfather, and this is talking with my cousin Ken Shea. My grandfather was born in 1895. So when they started working on a dam, he was a young boy. And him and a bunch of the neighborhood guys would go over behind where Ruth Foster's place, sit on the ledge and watch and take notes. So now you got an idea where he got the idea about being in construction. You see what I mean? 'Cause they did not have a lot of, it was all hand labor stuff. Sure. And horses, and, yeah. And it was built in stages. There's a lot of I'm pretty suspicious that there's a few dams that are still underwater up as well as the equipment. Kind of like Flagstaff Lake. There's a whole community still underwater up there.
Yeah.
So, you know, and it's pretty easy for a lot of people to say, oh, well, yeah, we'll take the dam out. That will return the fisheries to it. Well, I mean, that dam's been there for a long time, along with several other all the way up through. One relic that's still there between this dam and Graham Lake is up on the corner of the Shore Road. Used to be Mill Street, Shore Road. Right there, you look, see all the rocks there? Yeah, that was a sawmill. There used to be piles of sawdust in there when I was a kid. Yeah. So,
And I think, you know, to wind folks up who may be new to this, a few groups came in maybe 3 or 4 months ago to present an economic study of the Reunion River that I believe was sponsored by Downey Salmon Federation, Heart of Ellsworth, I think Frenchman's Bay Conservancy was on there as well, maybe a couple other groups, into their kind of analysis on, you know, some feasibility studies on if the dam stay there, but also if the removal of just the Leonard Lake Dam were to occur, you know, what sort of economic impact, increased recreational potential access, increased potential for keeping Graham Lake levels higher, was kind of presented. I would, you know, say at the time as well, as I noted, like one of the big negatives too would be a loss of $110,000 a year taxpayer from the dam owner, which is how much that facility kicks off in tax revenues. So it would be an immediate drop. Tax base, I think, you know, there's not an enormous amount of residential development around Leonard Lake, but for the folks that have been there for generations and the folks that overlook it, like that's, you know, that would be a big deal. And I feel like I kind of at the time was, okay, well, this has been a 10-year process of relicensing, and maybe they do, maybe they don't. Like, interesting study, but when the license was denied by DEP, it was like, okay, are we going to have to consider this? And just seeing the response from Brookfield, it's, you know, it's very generic. Like, we're looking into this, and I don't know, and the city doesn't necessarily have a role to play here, a formal run anyways, but I kind of feel like similar with the courthouse that we may not have a formal role in there, but if it happens, and if they do decide not to pursue relicensing, you know, the city may have to, just similar happened in Bucksport and other places, to save their dams, both the Leonard Lake Dam, in addition to the Graham Lake Dam. And right now, the process, as I see it, is, you know, DEP's issued a denial of the permit because they didn't think that their fish passage mitigation was up to snuff. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission requires that water quality certification permit in order for them to be relicensed. So it seems as though Brookfield's kind of, we're waiting to see how they're going to determine this. One of my concerns is just, you know, my preference, if I have any, and it's really up to the council and the community here, is I'm just hoping for the status quo for another 30, 40 years, that dam can continue to generate electricity. I know a lot of folks say it's not a lot, but it's something, and with second highest energy cost in the nation, I really feel like we need to keep those pieces. And Leonard Lake and the Graham Lakes, I don't think there's any discussion of Graham, but that obviously if it's decommissioned. What's that?
if you think about it, if they don't get relicensed, and somebody else doesn't buy it and get it licensed to produce power, decommissioning, this is the worst case scenario, all right? The dam's sole purpose is to generate electricity. So you take this dam out or lower it, or take the generating assets out of it, and you decommission that, all right? Do you really think anybody's gonna, they buy this dam, they also buy Graham Lake? To me, and it makes perfect, this is common sense saying, now you're not gonna let me generate power out of this dam here, so, and you're telling me now I've got to take it out. I'm not making any power with that one there. Why should I maintain that one?
Tell you what.
Yeah, and I think
$30 million in property around that lake.
yeah, I think that's one of the
And that's what got a lot of people worked up about. And I'm worked up about it also for the fact that we keep saying we need more electricity, we need more energy, okay? Now, when you take hydro, it worked great before we did, the politicians allowed this deregulation, and Bangor Hydro became a distributor instead of generating assets, and then this, and now we're in the Versant, and CMP is the same deal, you know, and now we've got Brookfield running it for Black Bear. Well, I think it would be very, very bad economically for the city of Ellsworth and the surrounding towns around Graham Lake and all of the watersheds that feed into the Union River, okay? Because right now, since 1907, thereabouts, there hasn't been migration of certain species of fish and other aquatic life. All right? You take that out, the other consequences are what kind of other creatures and plants are going to now migrate up through the state to our drinking water.
Yeah,
And then, and other, you know, the largest aquifer feeds down under Graham Lake, all the way down through towards Lemoyne.
Yeah, and I should note I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You know, I said before, I hope that the status quo gets to be able to be maintained, and I am looking for a bit of council guidance on if we just kind of want to let this process play out and.
I have a question.
Yep.
What's the status of the license right now?
It's denied from a quality permit, and this is where it gets like, you know, you'd need, there's like, you know, probably a ton of lawyers from big organizations, and it's really in Brookfield's side to say, hey, what's the next step? Do they want to appeal this latest denial? Do they want to, they could say, we're going to meet all of these requirements from the DEP on this type of fish ladder to be created, or that to me, that's like the hard thing, Carol, is like, I don't know, and I'm not privy to any of these internal conversations. There doesn't, like with the state, there's not like a special energy regulator for the state, so it's really the DEP's denied the water permit, and then it's between them, you know, and they, you know, rightly so, or care about the fish, and this business, rightly so, cares about like, is this economically viable over 30 years with these new environmental regulatory requirements, which were not placed on them previously. So that's probably the decision that Brookfield, which is like a massive company, Black Bear Hydro is a subsidiary of Brookfield. So I'm sure just like, and they did own the dams on the Kennebec, so that is a potential similar case where the Kennebec dams were decommissioned, and the Nature Conservancy came in and is basically helping with the decommissioning of that. So I think it worked for Brookfield. I would assume so. That's why they did it. Here, that's not as clear, and there's not a role really for the city in this process. I've thought about maybe reaching out to Senator Grahowski. There could be a legislative role, maybe Representative White to get more information. But
Okay, so by status quo, you mean we don't have to build a fish ladder?
no, that right now, and I think if Brookfield decided not to move forward, it would then be a question of how do they want to decommission the dams. To your point, maybe they would, like the Nature Conservancy and the Kennebec, maybe they would work with, and it seems like there are some groups based on that economic study of the Union River that would work with them on that. To your point, Councilor Shea, and I also don't want to be alarmist here. I think I mentioned to somebody, I don't know if I'm like Chicken Little on this and the sky really could be falling, or if I'm just crying wolf and it's like, hey, that's not going to happen. It's going to be relicensed, status quo maintained, because there's not great information here. There's, but your point on Graham, like, Leonard, I prefer the status quo. I don't, there's some houses that have been there for a long time. I would love to see that maintained and continue electricity generation. In Graham Lake, that's like an unmitigated financial disaster for the city, the equivalent of losing like 6 mills. The city will have to work to make that a non-energy producing part of this dam and a fish ladder, and working with local environmental groups to make this fish ladder work, working with the DEP, like they're really without massively cutting city services or changing the tax burden on wealthier homes on the lakes to, less wealthy homes that are not on lakes, which is, I would never want to consider that. We'd have to do something enormous to make sure that's there.
Is it logical to believe that it's going to get to a point where the state says, build a fish ladder or take the dam down? Is that?
I think that is their regulation, is the fish ladders are requirements, not, now, obviously, Leonard is a much taller dam than the Graham Lake, so expense-wise. And I should also note for the conservation organizations that sponsored the Union River study, none of them were about taking down the Graham Lake Dam. Is that, in fact, they were quite adamant that, they would want to work to save that dam, fish ladder passage, maintaining the flow levels in Graham. So, and in some ways, I think they were arguing that piece could help Graham Lake's levels not have to go down as much. So again, I haven't done our own independent analysis of this. This is in many ways like the city is just sort of a bystander on this process.
That was my impression. We don't really have much control over this. It's kind of events happening around us.
Yeah, and if, if there is a decision from Brookfield to walk away, or from, that study, and what we would need to do would come to the front of the mix. And I want to make sure folks know that, that not just for the folks on Graham Lake, while that is the bigger environmental issue, the folks on Leonard Lake deserve a seat at the table on what happens here. And do we have to consider operating the Leonard Lake Dam as a non-hydro producing, electricity producing dam for its historic preservational piece for the preservation of Leonard Lake, and still working on Graham Lake flows to be better now that we don't have to run that for electricity. I would still want to prep that scenario, and would really want a large public engagement process, that it's not just a fait accompli for Leonard Lake.
So, my understanding is Brookfield walks, so they could walk away. They could say, we're not going to do this, and they could abandon the dam. And then the question becomes, who takes ownership of the dam? Is that the thinking?
I believe in this, they would have to decommission those dams. So
They would have to decommission them?
Yeah, I don't think it would necessarily, and I did have a few conversations relative to that, that it's not like the other, there's kind of a gray area in those non-hydro.
Non-hydro, right? Is Graham also hydro?
It's a hydroelectric dam, yeah.
They both are.
Sorry, not Graham. No,
Graham.
Graham, but I think they're kind of part and parcel because you need one to do the other, right? So it's not producing the electricity there, but
But it's controlling the water levels. But if, in theory, if,
Graham Lake's an earthen dam with concrete sluiceways,
yeah.
and it's been fixed up some, all right? And Route 180 used to go over the top of the bridge. Well, that's not really, the bridge was failing. And the other thing, the federal regulations and stuff, it's like, no, you really shouldn't allow vehicle traffic over your dams, because if something happens, you mess up the water. And the last time that dam, there was a huge issue with the Graham Lake Dam, I think it was like 1923, 1924, and it was in the spring, and there was a lot of rain, a lot of snow that winter, and Graham Lake failed. And it come down through, and it took out parts of the Route 1A bridge, which was at the time called the Bangor Road. And Infant Street, it lifted it up and took that right down, and it come over the top of this dam and flooded downtown Main Street. And there was, I got a picture somewhere of a steel trestle bridge where the current bridge is now. Yeah, that all went down to the spindle.
We don't want that.
I believe if you do the Riverwalk Trail, you can probably see the foundation of one of the buildings right to your left. And I got to see like a side by side of what that street used to look like, and buildings were right on the water. If I understand the flood right.
Yeah.
So back to if the Leonard Lake Dam, if Brookfield walks away from it, it's decommissioned. That decommission means getting rid of the dam.
Or it could be it being taken over as a non-hydroelectric producing dam, but the requirements would still
Yeah.
hold. So there'd be a very
I can't
expensive-
imagine anyone's gonna voluntarily take over a dam that has no value but only liability.
Yeah.
So it'd
I was
probably
gonna say, what
be-
you can have bragging rights, so I own a dam.
I own the most expensive dam that doesn't make any money. So, I mean, the reason I asked is because if Graham Lake is not hydro
It's just
producing,
storage.
I think it could be that type of dam. I may be wrong, but those are the types of dams that can be abandoned.
Yeah.
And that's what's been going on in Bucksport and Orland. And in those situations, the towns, last year, right, they voted to create these quasi-governmental entities that in essence now regulate those dams and have a way of collecting revenues both from the folks that live on the lake and the towns to pay for them. And we'll see how that works out. So it may be a blueprint that the city can follow. But this is helpful. But again, end of the day, we're kind of just waiting to see what happens, and then we have to go from there.
Currently, what they do is they trap fish, mainly alewives, but whatever gets in the traps, there's a crewman, they have a contract to truck the fish upstream, right to Graham Lake and let them go. There is a fish ladder at Graham Lake,
Oh, there is.
but some people tell me it's substandard. I don't know, I'm not a fish.
You ever tried to swim up it, Pat?
No, I try to avoid, I've worked on a lot of a lot of dams, and I also unfortunately had to go help find people that had gone through, and it's not, yeah. It's a resource that we have, you know what I mean? And it does, this one here does produce electricity. A lot of others could be a little bit better if they weren't using it to make up so much power because of the demand. The water quality could be better. But then again, you gotta look at the water quality coming from upstream and the tributaries feeding into it.
I believe this would also, the ladder requirements might also be on Green Lake as well. And again, there's a fish hatchery there, a much easier dam to get over, but it really is, it seems like the DEP's, and I've read some news articles on this too, on what they've been doing on the Kennebec. They're really trying to introduce some of these species back in a much more aggressive way than they have previously. I think you're right, Councilor Lyons, on, if that decommissioning were to happen, that is kind of the most likely scenario with the Leonard Lake Dam. That's a very big and expensive fish ladder, and you're probably not going to have, the environmental groups who are hoping to restore the river above that be looking to foot the bill of the, however tall that dam is. However, the Graham Lake one is one that, in their previous presentations, it did seem like they would be very interested in working with the city and others to, figure out some sort of quasi municipal group partnership, citizens, the folks on Graham Lake, to have it there. But at the same time, too, I do feel like the folks that live on Leonard Lake, well, they're not going to be a ton of them. Even if that were to happen, I would want to prep the scenario on, what would a non-operable dam there take in terms of maintenance and levels and timelines, because there's going to be, this will make, a data center licensing. This was going to be a big time for all of us, because especially in Graham Lake, we want to make sure those folks know that we're doing everything possible to give them tons of information, tons of community engagement projects. I saw that with the Bucksport. It was just a really nervous time for a lot of people, and just seeing some of these pieces now, I'm hopeful that the status quo will be maintained. But if it's not, we'll probably have to circle up really quick as a council and figure out a good process moving forward. So I might still just reach out to some of our state representatives who, would probably be involved in any of that work if that were to happen. So.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments, council? Okay.
Good discussion.
Yeah, good discussion, thank you.
On to, I want to table the retail caregiver cannabis regulations. I will note I had a really great meeting with the owner of Bosley Genetics just to talk about, I know we had a motion to approve the license with some conditions last time around, but, I get some kind of initial information that I'm going to keep her and the council and the public updated as we go forward with this on, a lot of the things that I put last time around and sort of this gray area of a retail caregiver cannabis versus a medical dispensary. There's a lot of ins and outs here. I have a meeting with our lawyer tomorrow on this subject, so just want a little bit more information. There's a lot happening over the last week, and wasn't able to fully prep on this piece yet, so I'm just gonna table that discussion and go to another one. Downtown restrooms. I don't know if Twyla's still here. Do we have maybe Amanda and Brian and Mike? Wow, they got the whole gang here tonight. I guess we can also come up.
Yeah,
And
you want me to jump in? Or you want me to-
yeah, if you could kind of maybe, just
Yeah. First of all, it's nice to be with you in person and talk about this because it was no fun not being able to be here and trying to go through a PowerPoint that I pre-recorded. But thank you I just want to thank the council for being willing to table this so we can have a little more conversation around it. And want to make sure we're answering any questions you have tonight before going back to the full council meeting. This time has given me a little bit, since I was away, of time also to talk more with Public Works, since this is kind of an interdepartment collaboration, figuring out how to do this. And so I just want to, I don't know if you want to say anything like about the utilities installation, but just being able to talk through that was helpful.
So, Mike Harris, Public Works Director. Just a couple clarifying points. I know it came up in the last discussion, and there was some talk about the Highway Department, Public Works, building the bathrooms and installing the power and stuff like that. We would not install the power. We don't do that. Obviously, that piece, we would reach out to the electrician that we typically use for city installations to handle the power piece of that. Really,
You're good.
really for us, we're talking about, constructing the building, installing the sewer line and connecting water. The power will be left to somebody else. And really it was framed to you guys that if it's something that was, the city was gonna wanna do, we were just offering an alternative to help with costs. Rather than trying to spend money on a prefab unit that costs a lot more money, or hiring a contractor. The thought process, when the discussion was had with Brian and I and the rest of the group, is that we're not talking about a really complicated building here. And we're not talking about something that needs to be really fancy. It just needs to be practical. And then it's up to the city and the council how they want to manage it. But I think most of the concerns that people were talking about in terms of having a public bathroom, and some of the horror stories you hear from other towns and cities when they put in public bathrooms, I think a lot of that's solved by your management style and how you handle your bathroom. We've had the public bathrooms at the harbor for years and we haven't had any issues down there. Really, you just need to have your bathroom set up, constructed right. You need to control the hours. You need to have locks on it. And you need to build it with floor drains and material that you can use a hose in it if you really need to. And then it's just really, one of the reasons that this location was selected is because it's highly visible with a lot of eyes on it. It's not tucked away somewhere where people can try to engage in nefarious activities around it. So my feeling is, I think it would benefit the city to have a public restroom. I think if we manage it correctly and do our due diligence, I think it could be a successful collaboration with us and the downtown businesses. And I'd rather look at the positives than the negatives when we look at projects. I think we spend a lot of time looking at the negatives all the time and not enough time looking at the positives. So that's where I stand on it.
And I think we had talked to kind of Caro, and I've got some alternative too on this talk about, but on the note, we know Caro mentioned on downtown business owners and that this is a big importance, something they've been stressing for a decade now on how they have to deal with the growing tourism and folks using their facilities and the pressures it puts on them. Were you out for this, or did you want to speak on this? Or?
I mean, I am pro it.
Okay.
I didn't really have a whole thing set up, but I am excited that you're talking about it.
Okay, I didn't know if there's, I saw you.
Yeah. I'm happy you're talking about it. I think it's really gonna be beneficial. We use the restroom in our store.
If we're gonna have a business owner speak, maybe you could approach the microphone and identify yourself.
I wasn't really ready.
No, you don't have to. Your choice, but if you were.
Hi, I'm Molly Delina, and I own Union Riverbook and Toy downtown, and also now Delina Properties tomorrow will close on the building. So we're also the new building owners, which is awesome.
Congratulations.
And we've owned the store for 4 years, and the restrooms is constantly discussion among the downtown businesses, owners, people having trouble with sewage and having trouble with just like constantly needing to either keep them locked and walk people in, or, it's not really, we have a lot that we need to pay for downtown to have the businesses and to have our really awesome downtown. And so we would take any help that we can get on the things that we really can't do ourselves. So.
Awesome. Sorry to put you on the spot like that. I thought now I'd go to some of the cons too. Is the cost? I think this was around $40,000. Yes, it would be with tax increment financing from the economic development TIF, which we have around $200,000 or so in surplus for this next fiscal year. That's restricted to economic development related activities. So, but there are other economic development related activities, and there are specific infrastructure type projects. The courthouse road could be eligible for this type of funding. So that's that might not even be 1 year on a debt service. It definitely wouldn't be on a project of that magnitude. And this has been a 10-year kind of request from the business owners. I definitely think cities with this much growth and this much tourism and this full of a downtown, having a downtown bathroom, I think makes a lot of sense. And Twyla would say did an incredible amount of work in addition to the TIF districts on not just this project. I think we kind of did an after-action report with our project management team after the last meeting. I was like, hey, there's some really good questions asked that we weren't prepared enough for, and also we didn't do probably enough of, hey, here's the other prep work on, here are the 3 other options that Twyla came out with that were going to be 3 times more expensive, 6 times more expensive. And, one of the great things about this crew that we have is, this could be something that they could really felt like it was a cost savings for the city, but then also we need to do that whenever we use Public Works, to do a project that could be a cost savings by doing it internally. There's an infinite amount of backlog of ditching and road repairs and, mowing. I mean, they're net negative 1 employee this year. 2 have been spun off to help with the Parks and Rec department. There's a lot of cross collaboration, a lot of these things, but they're already, so while we would have a cost savings by having the team do this, there would also be that cost of things that we wouldn't be doing. And in this case, it would be substantial, $50,000, $60,000 in savings to having a facility, but having our teams do it, it might really be valuable. But we need to be a little bit more upfront about the opportunity cost there.
On that note, I can't recall if Twiley provided it last meeting, but do you have a sense of how many city employees and how long that it would take to build it soup to nuts?
Probably a question for.
Well, just so we're clear, part of it would not be built just
Yeah.
by highway, because the sewer guys, our sewer guys would,
So, yeah, so we
Sewer.
highway and sewer guys?
and so sewer would participate in installing the service, which is not very difficult. And then our water crew would help do the water hookups and stuff, so it wouldn't solely be on the highway department. The majority of the construction would be on the highway department.
And the highway department would be like putting up the physical building
Yes.
itself?
Yeah.
Okay.
But how many?
Do you know, have a sense of how
You're gonna be
long?
probably week and a half putting the water and the sewer in, time you get that all backfilled and put the pavement back, stuff like that, or the slab, or the building up. Interior, it wouldn't be the whole crew, I'd have like 3 guys on it, 4 guys on it, and you'd probably be 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay. And, all right, that's
You're
helpful.
gonna be a week on the slab, time you get it framed up, poured, and get it prepped on the outside, let it cure, then you can start building on it.
Okay, great, thank you. Bet.
Have you guys checked where the property lines are?
Yes.
Positive where they're at?
We asked, Rob,
Rob Shea,
Rob gave us the information.
Yeah.
went up, saw Larry, and what we can do by the GS map. So it'd be,
As far as
Far
everything,
as-
all the
far as
information we
price-
gathered, that property is city property.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, as far as I'd like to know is price and then maintenance of it. And usually, you know, if you're gonna do this, you might as well do a bid, just like we do a bid for a private contractor. And I know you guys are really, really, really busy. There's a lot of work out there that still has to be done.
Yeah, I mean, just so we're
And
clear,
then
Pat,
the other thing
I don't
is-
disagree with you. I
Yeah.
think you should bid it. I'm just
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
that we're an alternative to it.
Yeah, you know, and honestly, you know, I have a problem with having restrooms down here. You look at a lot of main communities around, yeah, people, Harbor's got one. Oh, yeah, well, it's down by the waterfront. Camden's got one. Oh, yeah, it's down by the water. Rockland's got one. Yeah, it's down by the waterfront. Yeah. Look, and then we have, I know of 3 storefronts that aren't even being utilized, and they're owned by nonprofits. You see what I mean? And I just, like I said, I'm not a fan of putting bathrooms down here in the parking lot, tying up valuable parking spots. And the other thing is,
There's no parking spot there, there's a building there.
Wouldn't take any, away from any parking spots.
That's
okay.
where that white shed is right there.
Currently, there is a porta-john taking up a parking spot, but, so I think there, which.
And that leads to another issue. I don't like the looks of porta-johns. I think they're disgusting. I work construction. I do everything in my power not to go into the nasty things, because lots of times I go into them and somebody's camping out in them. Or they've thrown bottles and other debris down in there, or they missed the hole completely. I don't know about you women, but I'm sorry. It's just totally disgusting.
I think we've all witnessed a
Yeah,
unfun porta john.
so, you know,
Which
like I said,
gets me to my next.
Public toilets, restrooms are a good place to dump a lot of taxpayers' money. We have how many facilities right now that we take care of?
We have the public restrooms, we have the harbor, which is what I would envision we would
Yeah, yeah.
have, not a porta potty.
Yeah?
And the harbor has operated fine for years.
Yeah?
We don't have people sleeping in them, we don't have
What
people
about,
throwing stuff in them.
Knowlton Park, is there
Nolan
one?
Park's been operating
Yeah?
for quite a
Is there
while, and that's
another one
been
in
fine.
Anywhere else?
This building.
there's one at
This building
DeMeyer
here?
Field.
I'd say
but that's
DeMeyer
not
Field
a
has
lot.
bathrooms.
The library as well, and honestly, the library talked to a bit, like they get a ton of traffic in there,
Yeah.
similar to our,
Yeah.
and just, that
Yeah.
is a main focal point. I would note that, I think we'll also come back, we have this as unfinished business for the council meeting. I do want to, while we have Robert up here, kind of, to get to your point, we do have, like, essentially what the temporary solution was last year, which I think was supported somewhat. We didn't have too many issues with that last year, which was the porta-john that's in the parking lot. I've just got this, got an update on the discussion. So, we're kind of just holding the status quo for what was done last year. The Heart Ellsworth, thank you very much, is paying that for the first month out here while we tabled that motion for further discussion. We'll come back again. But again, I had some great dialogue with Councilor Shea on just, hey, that might not be legal. You're only allowed to have them for 7 days. There needs to be a certified plumbing inspector. And that was one of the things that we were talking about last year, and Robert was issuing kind of guidance. And so I started looking it up with the code team and came across this August 2024 notice, which is like the most confusing Maine CDC drinking water guidance. It spends 4 paragraphs talking about how you're not allowed to have them for more than 7 days. You need a certified public inspector or plumbing inspector. And then at the bottom, actually the legislature passed a rule saying you are allowed to have them longer than 7 days. You don't need a certified plumbing inspector as long as it's well maintained and it's not like part of a restaurant or very like specific use cases. So that is in compliance. Although I think, Robert, you said that CDC is still like, we'd like you to.
The DHHS, in their rules, they make no mention of this. So in their book, it still shows all of the rules as we enforced them last year, where the LPI has to give approval for anything longer than 7 days, which is what we did last year. But the legislature has made it a moot point on the porta potty. As long as they have a contract to maintain the porta potty, they can have it.
So it is in compliance. We could, at the same time, if the council thought that that's an eyesore, I think it's kind of an eyesore, but it's kind of a compromise. So at least there's some level of facility, and similar to last year, we could make it more restrictive so that those requirements would be in place. In Twyla, surface that there's like a facility in Blue Hill where it's like public restrooms where there's like, they kind of build like a privacy shelter of wood and then put 2 porta-johns in there, so at least it's not, this flagrant porta-john in the middle
More
of the park.
aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah,
It's a classy porta-john.
It's a classy.
I think is the modifier more aesthetically pleasing. Aesthetically pleasing might not be, but definitely more than
Less
just.
offensive.
Little porch, little
Do
gable.
like DOT does, just put a tank in the ground and hole in the floor.
So I think we might try to just be
Saves on water,
somewhat general with.
saves on water cleaning.
That we could have that there as well. We could think about I can see Mike, it's not exactly the most aesthetically pleasing, obviously a real facility, and that we should consider that, but that could also be a middle option here, probably be much, much cheaper just to, buy more time, still have, double the capacity of 2 porta-johns out there, same location, make it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, but want to try to just seeing how Blue Hill's doing it, and I'm not a huge fan of that, but it might be another option to consider as we think whether to move forward with this more permanent option, to think about a temporary porta-john option that's a little more aesthetically pleasing, or to not pursue this altogether and say we don't really want these kind of restroom facilities in our downtown. I think obviously that's worthy of discussion as well.
Purely theoretical question. Theoretical, I'm not advocating for this, I'm just curious. Could you fit 2 there?
The 2,
2 restrooms?
it would be 2 restaurants.
Oh, it would be 2?
Yeah, it was 2.
Okay, all right.
Next to each other.
Yeah, it would be 2.
Changing tables?
We could, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, really what you need to look at is, we already talked about moving the pole.
Yeah.
You can move the pole, measure the area, because really what you gotta look at is ADA compliance and things like that as well. So, if it's ADA compliant, it's gonna be enough room in there to put a changing table on the wall.
Yeah.
So, but 2 individual restrooms, for people to use, connected to the city sewer, connected to city water, and then built in such a way that, maintenance doesn't become a huge thing. Very practical, just what you need. That's the concept that I'm looking at. we're looking at.
So are you anticipating at the next council meeting, we would have options to look at, to consider? With this, the temporary white picket fence around porta potties versus,
Yeah, I think we'll have general figures for that. That would be pretty easy to scope
Yeah,
out.
but I think what you should understand at this point is it's probably not gonna happen this summer, no matter what you want,
No.
as far as the building goes. So, we would talk more about it, but, you know, my thought process is if this is a project that you think you wanna move forward with, the better time frame would be the shoulder season in the fall before winter gets here, when summer's pretty much slowed down. Then we could dedicate the time to build it and, you know, bring it into service the following spring.
so if we can, you're looking at having those options for us.
Yeah, I think it's like it's really kind of directional in some ways too, because I think in some ways the more permanent option with this group is kind of gone for this summer. I mean, we could move forward with it, or the materials, and, if we really wanted to move forward. But to bid it out, that's gonna be, if we're gonna put it in the RFP process,
Right.
that's, a full month for the full RFP process to move forward, and then depending on where it lines up with, and it is over 15,000, so it would need a public hearing, depending on if we get any bidders on doing the work. So we're looking at, September. And, at the same time, there is still a lot more tourism activity.
Shoulder
Gosh,
season is very
October
long
was
these days,
crazy here last year. So if we wanted to consider the other option directionally is like, that's just too expensive. We're not really interested in moving forward than this now, even for the late fall, and we want to consider more of the temporary. We can kind of get you some directional, but, really consider that like a 2-year process as we, if I wouldn't want to do that unless it's going to be for a couple of years, just leave it there. Might be able to do that a little sooner than the other one. It would be well under 15,000, so, we could do the bidding process a lot faster in that case, and see if we want to put that in Public Works' schedule and, probably save a pretty substantial amount of funds. But in that scenario, I'd say like we should be on hold for at least 2 years and just see how that plays out there for this late summer and fall, next summer, how it's going with those 2 restrooms there that are in a privacy area. I wouldn't want to do the other restroom option until we actually just had that kind of there for a while.
The other point I want to add, Pat gave a good inventory of some of the restrooms, but Bar Harbor also has one in the downtown, as does Damascotta. I mean, there is precedent for these, not just as we have in Harbor Park, but in downtowns to serve customers who are not all just visitors, but those of us who live here as well.
Yeah, Damascotta, I think, is probably the most analogous to us and a lot of the traffic we see. And that was a long process. They did a really nice job on that facility, kind of a nice brick building that kind of matches their downtown. A lot more expensive than what we would be considering, but.
I think for the money, we were trying to find something that would be, and I'm not bashing Bangor and what happened there, but like just, we know that the feedback from that has not been positive, so we could go a route like that for cheaper. I think there's maybe 18,000 a piece or something like that. But just kind of anticipating the outcome we want from this, we thought it would be wise, if we're going to do it well, and to have something that we feel good about, and it's not unsightly, right, in our parking lot out there, so. But it comes with a cost.
Appreciate the work that you all put into the options.
But again, if this is something council is saying, we don't want to see, or it's not time, and that's, I think we're trying to respond to everything we've heard from the public, and Cara did a wonderful job, I think, with the council meeting of really putting forth a lot of information that Heart of Ellsworth has gathered over the past 10 years, feedback from the downtown businesses, so, not wanting to turn a deaf ear to that, but also understanding the costs and the restrictions around it and how we're trying to be fiscally responsible, and, so how do we find a middle ground, and this felt like it could be a good middle ground that way and not spend so much money, but again, if council says not now, then it's not now. We'll find another solution.
Any other questions, staff and council? It's time to build it or get off the pot on this. And with that, we're at the end of our workshop. I've been waiting for that one. And I thank everyone for their participation, and thank you. Have a good night.
Have a nice crowd.